The train whistle screamed through the Nevada desert as Beatrice Thompson pressed her gloved hand against the scarred half of her face, watching the dusty outline of Reno emerge through the window like a mirage she wasn't sure she wanted to reach. The other passengers had stopped staring 3 states ago, their initial curiosity about the veiled woman in the corner seat satisfied by whispered speculation and sidelong glances. Beatrice had heard every word. Mail order bride. Poor man, whoever's waiting. Probably lied about what she looked like. She wondered if they were right, if Zachary Ashford would take one look at her and send her right back on the next train to St. Louis. The letter accepting his proposal sat folded in her reticule, written 3 months ago when desperation had felt like courage and loneliness had masqueraded as hope. The scars ran from her left temple down to her jaw, a twisted landscape of pink and white tissue that pulled her eyes slightly downward and made her smile crooked. The factory fire that killed her parents had marked her in ways that went deeper than skin, but the visible reminders were enough to ensure no man in Missouri would have her. Zachary's advertisement had said nothing about beauty. It mentioned a ranch, hard work, and the need for a woman who wouldn't run from difficulty. Beatrice had written back that night, her hand shaking as she dipped the pen, wondering if honesty would serve her better than omission. She had told him about the scars. He had written back anyway, his script neat and practical. Come to Reno. What matters is whether you can love this land and build something lasting. The rest is just details. The rest is just details. She had read those words 100 times, trying to believe them, failing most days. Now the train was slowing, brakes squealing against iron wheels, and the moment of truth was arriving whether she was ready or not. Reno Station was smaller than she expected. A wooden platform weathered gray by the desert sun, and a single building that served as both depot and telegraph office. Beatrice gathered her 2 carpet bags, everything she owned in the world, and stepped onto the platform. The September heat hit her like a physical thing, dry and relentless, so different from the humid summers she had known. Dust swirled around her dark traveling dress as she set down her bags and looked around. The platform was mostly empty. A few passengers disembarked behind her, quickly claimed by waiting families. A freight handler rolled barrels toward a wagon. And standing alone at the far end of the platform, a tall man in a worn black hat watched her with an expression she could not read from this distance. Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs. She had sent a photograph taken before the fire, a young girl of 16 with smooth skin and bright eyes. She was 23 now, and that girl might as well have been a stranger. Her hand rose instinctively to her veil, checking that it was secure, before she forced it back down to her side. If he was going to reject her, better to have it done quickly. The man started walking toward her, and Beatrice tried to discern something from his gait, his posture, anything that might tell her what was coming. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who worked hard for a living. His shirt was clean but faded, tucked into dusty trousers, and his boots had seen serious use. As he drew closer, she could see his face beneath the hat brim. Strong features tanned dark by the sun, a straight nose, a firm mouth, and eyes the color of creek water that fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. For a long moment he said nothing, just looked at her with those steady eyes, and Beatrice felt her courage failing. "You did not come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should take the next train back. Miss Thompson." His voice was deeper than she expected, rough-edged but not unkind. "Yes." She could not make herself say more. "I'm Zachary Ashford." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "I've been waiting for you." "Have you?" The words came out sharper than she intended, defensive. "Looking at me now, are you sure about that?" Something shifted in his expression, a slight furrow between his brows. "You're wearing a veil." "Yes. You wrote about scars." Beatrice's hands clenched around her bags. "I did. I told you about the fire. I told you what it did to me." "If you have changed your mind, Mr. Ashford, I will understand, but I need to know now before I allow myself to hope for something that is not going to happen." He studied her for another moment, then reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his rough fingers found the edge of her veil. "May I?" She could not speak, could only nod once, sharp and quick. Zachary lifted the veil carefully, folding it back over her hat. The afternoon sun fell across her face, illuminating every ridge and valley of scar tissue, every imperfection she had learned to hate. She watched his eyes track across her face, taking it in, and waited for the familiar revulsion, the polite withdrawal, the carefully worded rejection. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his gaze thoughtful. "The fire that took your parents. Yes, I tried to save them. I failed." The words were bitter in her mouth. "You survived." Some would say that is debatable. Zachary's eyes snapped back to hers, and she saw something fierce there, something that made her breath catch. "Did you think I was looking for a ornament? Some pretty thing to sit in a parlor? Most men want a wife they can look at without flinching." "I'm not flinching." He said it flatly, a statement of fact. Then his hand rose, and before Beatrice could process what was happening, his calloused fingertips were touching her scarred cheek, tracing the line of twisted tissue with a gentleness that made her eyes burn. "These scars," he said quietly, "are just maps to your strength. They show you fought for the people you loved. They show you did not give up even when everything was burning down around you. That is what I see when I look at you, Miss Thompson. Not damage, not something broken. I see someone who knows what it means to keep going when it would be easier to quit." Beatrice could not stop the tears that spilled over, running down both cheeks, catching in the uneven landscape of her scars. No one had touched that side of her face with anything but clinical efficiency since the fire. No one had looked at her with anything but pity or disgust. And here was this stranger, this cowboy she had known for all of 5 minutes, telling her that her shame was strength. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. Zachary lowered his hand but did not step back. "Say you will still marry me. Say you will give this a chance. I know I am not much. The ranch is small, the work is hard, and there are days when I wonder if I am going to make it through another winter. But I will treat you with respect. I will never ask you to hide, and I will do everything in my power to build a life where you feel safe. You do not even know me." "No," he agreed, "but I would like to, and I think maybe you would like to know me too, or you would not have gotten on that train." He was right, of course. Beatrice had boarded in St. Louis with her heart in her throat and her few possessions clutched close, traveling across half the country to marry a man she had never met because the alternative was growing old and alone in a city that treated her like a ghost. She had chosen this. She had chosen him, based on nothing but letters and a desperate hope that somewhere in this vast country there might be a place for her. "I will stay," she said. "I will marry you, Mr. Ashford, and I will try to be a good wife." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "And I do not need good, I just need real." He picked up her bags as if they weighed nothing. "The ranch is about an hour's ride. I have a wagon waiting. Are you too tired, or can we head out now? There is a boarding house in town if you need to rest." Beatrice straightened her shoulders, ignoring the exhaustion that had settled into her bones after days of travel. "I am ready. Let us go home." The word felt strange in her mouth, unfamiliar and fragile. Home. She had not had one of those since the fire. But as Zachary smiled at her, a real smile that reached his eyes and made her heart do something complicated in her chest, she thought maybe, just maybe, she might find one here. The wagon was a sturdy buckboard pulled by two bay horses that nickered softly as Zachary loaded her bags. He helped her up to the seat with the same careful gentleness he had shown when lifting her veil, his hand steady on her waist. Then he swung up beside her, took the reins, and clicked to the horses. They moved forward smoothly, leaving Reno station behind and heading out into the open desert. Nevada stretched around them in every direction, vast and unforgiving under the late afternoon sun. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the bright sky. Sagebrush dotted the landscape, and the air smelled of dust and juniper. It was beautiful in a harsh way, nothing like the green hills of Missouri, and Beatrice felt something in her chest expand to meet it. "Tell me about the ranch," she said as the wagon rattled along the rutted road. Zachary kept his eyes on the horses but talked readily enough. "It is called the Lazy A. My father started it 20 years ago, but he passed 2 winters back. My mother died when I was young. It has just been me since then, trying to keep it going. I have about 200 head of cattle, some horses. There is a main house that needs work, a barn that is holding together mostly through stubbornness, and land enough to make something of if I can hold on to it." "Why might you not hold on to it?" He glanced at her, assessing how much truth she could handle. Whatever he saw in her face must have satisfied him because he answered honestly. "Water rights. There is a bigger outfit to the north, the Triple Bar, run by a man named Marcus Holbrook. He has been buying up smaller ranches, consolidating. He wants my water source, a good spring that runs year-round. He has made offers. When I refused to sell, the offers got less friendly." "Is he dangerous?" "He has not done anything I can prove," Zachary said carefully, "but I have lost cattle, had fences cut. Small things that could be accidents or could be pressure. I wanted you to know before we married. This life might not be safe. If that changes your mind, I will take you back to town, help you get settled somewhere else." Beatrice considered this. She had left safety behind when she walked into a burning building to try to save her parents. She had learned then that safety was an illusion, that terrible things happened whether you were careful or not. At least here, the danger came with a purpose, a life she could help build. "I am staying," she said firmly, "but I appreciate you telling me." Zachary nodded, something like relief crossing his face. "We will be married tomorrow if that suits you. There is a preacher in town, a good man. We can go in first thing in the morning, make it legal." "That suits me." Beatrice paused, then added quietly, "I have never kissed anyone." The wagon lurched slightly as Zachary's hands tightened on the reins. He cleared his throat. "That is all right. We can take things slow. I am not expecting anything you are not ready to give. I just wanted you to know. In case you were expecting someone with more experience. Beatrice." He said her name for the first time, and it sounded different in his rough voice, softer somehow. "I am expecting a partner. Everything else we will figure out together." The knot of anxiety in her chest loosened slightly. She had spent the entire train ride worrying about the wedding night, about Zachary's expectations, about whether she could be the kind of wife a man would want. His patience felt like a gift she had not known to ask for. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking rhythmically. The sun was lowering toward the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Beatrice watched the landscape roll past and tried to imagine herself here, tried to picture waking up to this vast sky every morning. "What was Missouri like?" Zachary asked eventually. "Crowded," Beatrice said. "After my parents died, I lived with an aunt who made it clear I was a burden. I worked in a dress shop, hemming garments and staying in the back where customers would not see me. It was not a life. It was just existing day after day, waiting for something to change. Do you miss it? Not even a little bit. The words surprised her with their vehemence. I miss my parents. I miss who I was before the fire. But Missouri? No. There was nothing for me there but pity and whispers. Zachary was quiet for a moment. People here will talk too. Small town, not much excitement. A new woman with scars marrying the struggling rancher will give them something to chew on for a while. Let them talk, Beatrice said. I am tired of hiding. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and smiled. Good, because I meant what I said. I will not have you hiding on my ranch. You are going to be my wife, and anyone who has a problem with how you look can take it up with me. The fierceness in his voice sent warmth flooding through her. Beatrice had spent 3 years believing she was unworthy of protection, of care, of anything but shame. Zachary was offering her something different, and she was going to grab it with both hands. The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise, a collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley with the mountains rising behind them. The house was a simple wooden structure, weathered but solid, with a covered porch that ran along the front. The barn was larger, its red paint fading to pink in places. Beatrice could see a chicken coop, a corral with several horses, and beyond that, open grazing land dotted with cattle. It was small compared to the grand ranches she had read about in dime novels, but it was real, and it was going to be hers, and something fierce and possessive rose in her chest at the sight of it. Welcome home, Zachary said quietly. The horses pulled the wagon into the yard, and before they had fully stopped, the front door of the house banged open. A woman emerged, older and round, with gray hair pinned up sensibly, and an apron tied around her ample waist. She hurried down the porch steps with surprising speed. About time. She called out, I was starting to think you got lost, Zachary Ashford. Zachary set the brake and jumped down. Mrs. Kimball, you did not have to wait. I told you I would be fine. And I told you a bride needs a woman's welcome, not to walk into an empty house. Mrs. Kimball turned her attention to Beatrice, and her eyes were sharp but kind. Come down from there, dear. Let me look at you. Zachary helped Beatrice down, and she stood uncertainly as Mrs. Kimball approached. The older woman's eyes tracked across her face, taking in the scars without flinching. Beatrice Thompson, Beatrice said, offering her hand. Mrs. Kimball took it, her grip warm and firm. Martha Kimball. I run the boarding house in town, and I have known this boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He wrote me that you were coming, asked me to help get the house ready. She looked Beatrice up and down, nodding approvingly. You look like you have got spine. You are going to need it out here. I am beginning to understand that. Good. Come inside. I have got supper warming and the spare room made up. You two are not married yet, so you will sleep separate tonight. Tomorrow after the wedding, well, that is your own business. Mrs. Kimball's tone was no nonsense, brooking no argument. Zachary looked faintly embarrassed. I appreciate you helping, madam. Someone has to keep you civilized, Mrs. Kimball shooed them toward the house. Go on now. I imagine Miss Thompson would like to wash up after her journey. The inside of the house was simple but clean. The main room held a stone fireplace, a worn sofa, a small dining table with mismatched chairs. A doorway led to what looked like a kitchen, and a narrow staircase climbed to the second floor. It smelled like wood smoke and coffee and something savory that made Beatrice's stomach remind her she had not eaten since breakfast. Mrs. Kimball led her upstairs to a small bedroom with an iron frame bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a single window that looked out over the ranch. It was Spartan, but after years of living in her aunt's cramped attic, it felt spacious. I will bring up hot water, Mrs. Kimball said. You take your time. Supper will keep." Left alone, Beatrice removed her hat and veil, setting them carefully on the bed. She unpinned her dark hair and let it fall around her shoulders, studying herself in the small mirror above the washstand. The scars looked livid in the lamplight, standing out against her pale skin. But for the first time in years, when she looked at her reflection, she heard Zachary's voice. "Maps to your strength." Maybe he was right. Maybe surviving had made her strong instead of broken. Maybe starting over here in this harsh, beautiful place could give her a chance to find out. A knock on the doorframe made her turn. Zachary stood there with a bucket of steaming water, his eyes carefully averted. "Mrs. Kimball sent me up. May I come in?" "Yes." He poured the water into the basin, then straightened, still not quite looking at her. "I am glad you are here. I know this is not what you might have hoped for, but I will do my best to make you happy." "Zachary," she waited until he met her eyes. "Look at me. Really look. This is what you are getting. If you are going to have second thoughts, have them now." He did look, his gaze moving across her face with that same careful attention he had shown at the station. "No second thoughts," he said. "Not a single one." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why me? You could have found someone prettier, someone whole." Zachary stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. "You want the truth. I am 26 years old, and I have been running this ranch alone for 2 years. I wake up before dawn and work until after dark, and most days I am too tired to do anything but fall into bed. I do not have time to court anyone, do not have the charm to sweep some town girl off her feet. And even if I did, most of them want a man who can give them an easy life in a nice house in town, not a struggling rancher who might lose everything to a land-grabbing neighbor." He paused, his jaw working as he searched for words. "When I put that advertisement in the paper, I was not looking for beauty. I was looking for someone strong enough to build a life in a hard place, someone who would not run when things got difficult. Your letter told me you had lost everything and kept going. Told me you were not afraid of hard work or honest struggle. That is what I need, Beatrice. That is what I want. The rest, the way you look, that does not factor into it at all." "But it must factor somehow," she insisted. "You will have to look at me every day." "Yes," he agreed. "And every day I will see the woman who was brave enough to come all this way to marry a stranger. I will see someone who faced down fire and loss and decided to keep living anyway. That is beautiful to me. That matters to me. The scars are just part of who you are. They do not define you unless you let them." Beatrice felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since the fire. "I want to believe you. Then believe me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her scarred cheek in his palm. His hand was warm, rough with calluses, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world to lean into it. "We are going to be all right, Beatrice. I do not know how yet, but we will figure it out." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Zachary smiled, then withdrew his hand and stepped back toward the door. "I will let you wash up. Come down when you are ready. No rush." After he left, Beatrice stood for a long moment, her hand pressed to the cheek he had touched. Her heart was doing complicated things, fluttering and racing in a way that felt both terrifying and wonderful. She barely knew this man, had only met him hours ago. But something about him felt solid, dependable, like bedrock she could build a life on. She washed quickly, changing from her travel-stained dress into a simple blue cotton one that brought out her eyes. When she made her way downstairs, she found Zachary and Mrs. Kimball setting the table. The older woman had laid out a meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and biscuits that smelled like heaven. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Kimball ordered, waving Beatrice to a chair. "You must be half-starved after that journey." The food was delicious, simple but prepared with care. Beatrice ate hungrily, while Mrs. Kimball kept up a steady stream of conversation, filling the potential awkwardness with talk about the town, the neighbors, the best places to buy supplies. Zachary interjected occasionally, but mostly he watched Beatrice with an expression she could not quite read. After supper, Mrs. Kimball announced she was heading back to town. "I will see you both in the morning at the church, 10 o'clock sharp. Do not be late, Zachary Ashford, or I will come looking for you." "We will be there," Zachary promised. After Mrs. Kimball left in her small buggy, the house felt very quiet. Beatrice helped Zachary clear the table, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked. Each touch sent little sparks through her, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. "You should get some rest," Zachary said finally. "Tomorrow is going to be a big day." "Where will you sleep?" He gestured to the sofa. "There is fine. I have slept in worse places." Beatrice wanted to protest, to say he should take his own bed, but she was not quite brave enough to share a room with him yet. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything, for being kind. You do not have to thank me for basic decency. Maybe not, but I am going to anyway." She started for the stairs, then paused and looked back. Zachary had settled onto the sofa, pulling a blanket over himself. In the lamplight, he looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper. This man who had worked himself to exhaustion trying to save his family's ranch. This man who had taken a chance on a scarred stranger because he needed a partner, not an ornament. "Zachary," he looked up. "Yes." "I am glad I came." His smile was slow and warm and made her heart skip. "So am I. Good night, Beatrice." "Good night." She climbed the stairs to the small bedroom, her mind spinning. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew, pledge her life to his, become Beatrice Ashford instead of Beatrice Thompson. It should have terrified her. Instead, as she climbed into bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin, she felt something that might have been hope. Morning came early, sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing from the yard. Beatrice woke disoriented for a moment, forgetting where she was. Then memory flooded back and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. Today was her wedding day. She washed and dressed carefully, choosing the best dress she owned, a dark green that her aunt had grudgingly bought her last year. It was simple but well made, fitted at the waist and falling in soft folds to the floor. She pinned up her hair, leaving a few strands loose to frame her face. After a moment's hesitation, she left the veil upstairs. Zachary had seen her. He had called her beautiful. She was not going to hide today. When she came downstairs, Zachary was already up, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt that looked freshly pressed. He had shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw, and his wet hair was combed back. He looked handsome and nervous and very young, despite the weathering of hard work. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her. Beatrice touched her scarred cheek self-consciously. "You do not have to say that." "I know I do not have to, I want to." He offered his arm. "Ready?" She took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric. Ready. The ride to town was quiet, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts. Reno was coming to life as they arrived, shops opening, people moving about their business. Zachary drove straight to a small white church at the edge of town. Mrs. Kimball was waiting on the steps, along with an elderly man in black who must have been the preacher. "Right on time, Mrs. Kimball approved. "Reverend Patterson, this is Miss Beatrice Thompson and Zachary Ashford." Reverend Patterson was a thin man with kind eyes and a gentle handshake. "Pleased to meet you both. Shall we go inside?" The interior of the church was simple, wooden pews facing a plain altar. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. It was not grand, but there was something peaceful about it, something that made Beatrice's racing heart slow slightly. Reverend Patterson took his place at the altar while Mrs. Kimball served as witness. Beatrice and Zachary stood facing each other, hands joined. His palms were slightly damp, matching hers. Somehow knowing he was nervous too made her feel better. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Patterson began, his voice filling the small space. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The familiar words washed over Beatrice as she looked up at Zachary. He was watching her intently, his eyes never leaving her face. When it came time for the vows, his voice was steady and clear. "I, Zachary Ashford, take you, Beatrice Thompson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, protect you, and stand by you through whatever comes. I promise to build a life with you, to work alongside you, and to never ask you to be anything but yourself." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. When it was her turn, she had to swallow hard before she could speak. "I, Beatrice Thompson, take you, Zachary Ashford, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to honor you, support you, and stand by you through whatever comes. I promise to help build our life together, to work alongside you, and to give you all that I am." Reverend Patterson blessed them and pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said to Zachary. Zachary's hands came up to frame Beatrice's face, one palm on each cheek, holding her as if she were something precious. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, when she rose on her toes to meet him instead, his lips touched hers in a kiss that was soft and careful and sweet. It was Beatrice's first kiss, and it felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, Mrs. Kimball was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Congratulations to you both. Now I've got a wedding breakfast waiting back at the boarding house. You will join me before heading home." Beatrice had not expected a celebration, had assumed they would simply sign the papers and leave. But Mrs. Kimball had clearly gone to some trouble, and as they followed her to the boarding house, Beatrice felt grateful for the older woman's kindness. The boarding house dining room had been decorated with wildflowers, and the table was laden with food: eggs, bacon, fresh bread, jam, coffee. A small cake sat in the center, frosted with white icing. "Mrs. Kimball, this is too much," Zachary protested. "Nonsense. Every bride deserves a proper celebration." Mrs. Kimball cut them each a slice of cake. "Eat up. You have got a long ride home." They ate while Mrs. Kimball talked, telling stories about Zachary as a boy, making Beatrice laugh with tales of his misadventures. Zachary bore it with good grace, though his ears turned red more than once. Finally, as the morning wore on, they took their leave. Zachary helped Beatrice back into the wagon and they headed out of town toward the ranch. This time, Beatrice did not feel like she was traveling toward the unknown. She was going home with her husband. The thought was strange and wonderful and a little frightening all at once. "Are you all right?" Zachary asked as they drove. "I think so. It is all very sudden." "We can take things as slow as you need," he assured her. "I meant what I said. I am not expecting anything." Beatrice studied his profile, the strong nose and firm mouth, the way his hands held the reins with easy competence. She thought about the kiss, about the way her heart had raced when his lips touched hers. She thought about the empty years stretching behind her and the uncertain ones ahead. "I do not want to take things slow," she heard herself say. Zachary's hands tightened on the reins. "Beatrice, I have spent 3 years hiding, 3 years believing I was not worthy of anything good. You are offering me a life, Zachary. A real life with a husband and a home. I do not want to waste any more time being afraid." He pulled the wagon to a stop, right there in the middle of the road with nothing around them but desert and sky. He turned to face her fully. "I need you to be sure. This is not something we can undo. I am sure." And she was. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely certain all at once. I want to be your wife in every way. I want to start our life together properly. Zachary searched her face, then nodded slowly. All right, then that is what we will do. He clicked to the horses and they started moving again, faster now. The ride home seemed to take forever and no time at all. By the time they pulled into the ranch yard, Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Zachary helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady on her waist, and then he was leading her toward the house. Inside, he closed the door and turned to face her. They stood in the dim coolness of the main room, looking at each other. I have never done this before, Beatrice whispered. Neither have I, Zachary admitted. The confession surprised her. Really, really. I have been too busy trying to keep this place running to have time for much else. He stepped closer, reaching up to unpin her hair. It fell in dark waves around her shoulders and he ran his fingers through it gently. We will figure it out together, just like everything else. He kissed her then, deeper than before, his arms coming around her to pull her close. Beatrice melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. She could feel the heat of him through the fabric, the solid strength of his body. When he lifted her into his arms, she gasped but did not protest, just wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her up the stairs. His bedroom was larger than the guest room, dominated by a big wooden bed covered in a plain quilt. Zachary set her on her feet beside it, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the buttons of her dress. Tell me if you want me to stop, he said. I will not want you to stop. And she did not. What happened next was awkward and tender and overwhelming in the best way. Zachary was careful with her, patient, his hands and mouth learning her body with the same focus he brought to everything else. When it hurt, he soothed her. When she gasped with pleasure, he smiled against her skin. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the sheets with the afternoon sun slanting through the window, Beatrice felt more whole than she had in years. Are you all right? Zachary asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Beatrice turned her head to look at him. His hair was mussed, his eyes soft in a way she had not seen before. I am better than all right. I am happy. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. Good, that is all I want. For you to be happy here. They dozed for a while, warm and sated. When Beatrice woke, the sun had moved lower in the sky. She could hear cattle lowing in the distance, the everyday sounds of the ranch. Beside her, Zachary was awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. I should get up, she said. There must be work to do. There is always work to do, it can wait a few hours. But he sat up anyway, stretching. Though I should check on the animals before dark. Want to come with me? I can show you around properly. Beatrice dressed quickly, aware of Zachary watching her with appreciation that made her blush. Downstairs, she found the kitchen and was pleased to see it was well stocked, if somewhat disorganized. She would have to learn where everything was, learn to cook on the wood stove, learn 100 small things about running this household. Outside, the late afternoon air was beginning to cool. Zachary took her hand naturally, as if they had been married for years instead of hours, and led her toward the barn. We have got 12 horses, he explained as they walked. Most are working animals, but there are 2 good riding horses. I will teach you to ride if you do not know how. I rode a little as a child, but it has been years. We will start slow then. You will need to be able to get to town on your own if something happens to me. Beatrice did not like thinking about something happening to him, but she recognized the practicality. Out here, self-sufficiency was not optional. The barn was dim and smelled of hay and horses. Zachary introduced her to each animal, telling her their names and personalities. The cattle, he explained, were spread out over the grazing land. They would start a roundup soon, checking the herd and marking new calves. "Can I help?" Beatrice asked. Zachary looked surprised. "It is hard work. Long days in the saddle." "I am not afraid of hard work." He smiled, that slow, warm smile that did things to her insides. "No, I do not suppose you are. All right. Once you are comfortable riding again, you can ride out with me." They walked the property as the sun set, Zachary pointing out landmarks, explaining the boundaries of his land and where the spring was that Marcus Holbrook wanted so badly. By the time they returned to the house, Beatrice's head was spinning with information, but she felt more grounded than she had since arriving. That night, she made her first meal in her new home. It was simple, just beans and cornbread, but Zachary ate it like it was a feast. Afterward, they sat on the porch as the stars came out, bright and numerous in the clear desert sky. "I used to sit out here with my father," Zachary said quietly. "He would tell me stories about starting this place, about the early days when it was just him and my mother and nothing but dreams. He always said the land would provide if we were willing to work for it. You think he was right? I want to believe he was. Some days it is hard to see it." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "But today, sitting here with you, I can believe it. Having you here makes everything feel possible." Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and sage and something uniquely Zachary. "We will make it work, whatever it takes." They sat in comfortable silence until the night chill drove them inside. In the bedroom, Zachary made love to her again, slower this time, less urgent. And as Beatrice fell asleep in his arms, she thought that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found where she belonged. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Beatrice woke before dawn with Zachary, made breakfast while he did the early chores, then spent her days learning the ins and outs of running the ranch household. There was always something to do: laundry, cooking, mending, preserving food for the winter ahead. Mrs. Kimball visited occasionally, bringing supplies from town and advice freely given. Zachary was patient as he taught Beatrice to ride again. They started in the corral with a gentle mare named Daisy, and gradually Beatrice's confidence returned. Soon she was riding out with him to check the herd, learning to spot trouble and help with the endless tasks that came with ranching. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done in St. Louis. Her hands blistered and then calloused. Her muscles ached from unfamiliar labor. But she was outside in the clean air and sunshine, working alongside her husband toward a common goal. She was building something real. And at night, Zachary held her close and told her she was doing wonderfully, and Beatrice believed him. They had been married almost a month when Marcus Holbrook finally made his appearance. Beatrice was hanging laundry when she saw the group of riders approaching. 6 men on horseback, moving at an easy pace that suggested they were in no hurry. She shaded her eyes, trying to make out details. The man in the lead was older, perhaps 50, sitting his horse with the confidence of someone who owned the world. "Zachary," she called toward the barn. He emerged quickly, saw the riders, and his expression darkened. "Go inside, Beatrice." "Who is it, Marcus Holbrook? I need you inside. Now." The urgency in his voice made her move. She hurried into the house but stayed by the window, watching as the riders entered the yard. Zachary stood alone, feet planted, arms loose at his sides. Holbrook dismounted, and Beatrice got her first good look at him. He was a big man running to fat with silver hair and a well-trimmed beard. His clothes were expensive, his boots polished. He looked prosperous and powerful, and Beatrice instinctively disliked him. "Ashford," Holbrook said, his voice carrying clearly. "It has been a while, not long enough." "What do you want, Holbrook?" "Just being neighborly. Heard you got yourself married. Thought I would come congratulate you. Consider me congratulated. Now get off my land." Holbrook's smile did not reach his eyes. Now, that is no way to treat a guest. Especially when I am here with another offer for your property. A good offer, better than last time. I have told you before I am not selling. Everyone has their price, Ashford, even stubborn fools like you. Holbrook's gaze drifted toward the house, and Beatrice knew he could see her in the window. Especially now that you have got a wife to think about. Women need security. Nice things. Can you really provide that scraping by out here? My wife is none of your concern. Is not she, though? Heard she came all the way from Missouri. Mail-order bride, right? Must be disappointed finding herself on this hardscrabble ranch when she could be living in comfort at the Triple Bar. Zachary's hands clenched into fists. You have got 5 seconds to get back on your horse and leave. Or what? You will take on all 6 of us. Holbrook laughed, but there was an edge to it. I am trying to do this the civilized way, Ashford, trying to make you a fair offer, but my patience has limits. You are sitting on water I need, and I am going to have it one way or another. Sell to me now, take the money and start over somewhere else, or keep being stubborn and see what happens. That sounds like a threat. That sounds like a prediction. Holbrook remounted his horse, looking down at Zachary. Think about it. Talk to your pretty wife. I will be back in a week for your answer. He wheeled his horse around, and the group rode out as casually as they had arrived. Beatrice rushed outside as soon as they were gone. Zachary was standing rigid, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Zachary. He turned to her, and the fury in his eyes made her step back. Then he seemed to see her properly, and the anger drained away, replaced by something that looked like fear. You should not have come out. What if he had seen you? He did see me. Through the window. Beatrice moved closer, placing her hand on his arm. What is he going to do? I do not know, but it is getting worse. The threats are getting less subtle. He pulled her close, holding her tight. Maybe I should sell, take his money, and we could start over somewhere else. Is that what you want? No, but I want you safe more than I want this land. Beatrice pulled back to look at him. This is your family's ranch. Your father built it. I am not going to let some bully run us off. Beatrice, you do not understand what you are saying. Holbrook is dangerous. Then we will be dangerous back. She said it fiercely, surprising herself. We will fight for this place, together. Zachary stared at her for a long moment, then a smile slowly spread across his face. You really mean that? I really mean it. This is our home. I am not losing another one without a fight. He kissed her hard, desperately, then rested his forehead against hers. All right, we fight, but we do it smart. No taking foolish risks, agreed. Over the next few days they prepared. Zachary taught Beatrice to shoot, setting up targets behind the barn and patiently correcting her stance until she could hit them more often than not. She would never be a great shot, but she could defend herself if needed. They reinforced the fences, checked the locks on the barn and house, and Zachary started carrying his rifle everywhere. The work continued, but there was an edge of tension now, a constant awareness that something bad might be coming. Mrs. Kimball visited, and Beatrice told her what had happened. The older woman's face went grim. Holbrook has been squeezing out small ranchers for years, she said. Most of them sell rather than fight. Those who do not, well, they tend to have unfortunate accidents. Nothing that can be proved, you understand, but enough to make them reconsider. What should we do? Beatrice asked. Stay alert, stick together, and do not give him any excuse to bring the law down on you. Mrs. Kimball patted Beatrice's hand. You are stronger than you look, child. You both are. You will get through this. A week later, right on schedule, Holbrook returned. This time he brought only 2 men with him, but all 3 were armed. Beatrice stood on the porch with Zachary, refusing to hide inside. Well, Holbrook called from his horse. What is your answer, Ashford? Same as before. No, Holbrook's eyes narrowed. You are making a mistake. That is my choice to make. And what about you, Mrs. Ashford? Holbrook turned his attention to Beatrice. You really want to tie yourself to this sinking ship? I could set you up nice in town, help you get back to Missouri if that is what you want. Beatrice stepped forward, her chin raised. I am exactly where I want to be, Mr. Holbrook, with my husband on our land. You are not welcome here. Something ugly flickered across Holbrook's face. You are as foolish as he is. Fine. Do not say I did not warn you. He yanked his horse's head around and rode off, his men following. That was brave, Zachary said quietly, also possibly stupid. I am tired of being scared. Beatrice took his hand. Whatever happens, we face it together. What happened was nothing, at least at first. Days passed with no sign of Holbrook or his men. Zachary stayed vigilant, but gradually they began to relax slightly, to hope that maybe Holbrook had decided they were not worth the trouble. Then the cattle started disappearing. It was subtle at first, a few head here and there, easy to miss in the vastness of the range. But Zachary noticed, and each missing animal drove him a little more tense. It is Holbrook, he said one night as they lay in bed. It has to be, but I cannot prove it. If I ride onto his land accusing him, he will have me arrested. What about the sheriff? The sheriff looks the other way when it comes to Holbrook. The man owns half the county one way or another. Beatrice rolled onto her side to face him in the darkness. Then we catch whoever is taking the cattle in the act. Get proof. That could be dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way we are doing something instead of just waiting. So they started keeping watch. Zachary would ride out at night, checking the herd, looking for signs of rustlers. Beatrice hated being left alone, but she stayed at the house with the rifle close, watching and listening. On the third night, Zachary came back riding hard just before dawn, another rider beside him. As they got closer, Beatrice saw it was a young man, maybe 20, with sandy hair and a nervous expression. Beatrice, this is Tom Miller, Zachary said as they dismounted. He has got something to tell us. Tom looked terrified. I did not know what else to do. Mr. Holbrook, he has been paying me and some of the other hands to move your cattle onto Triple Bar land. He said it was not stealing, just moving them where they belonged since he was going to own this place soon anyway. How many cattle? Zachary asked, his voice deadly calm. Maybe 50 head over the past few weeks. They are all branded Triple Bar now. I am sorry, Mr. Ashford. I needed the money and I did not think about what it meant. But last night, I heard Holbrook talking to his foreman. They are planning something worse. They are going to burn you out, make it look like an accident. I could not let that happen. Beatrice felt ice run down her spine. When? I do not know. Soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. I came as soon as I could get away. Zachary looked at Beatrice and she could see him thinking, calculating. Tom, are you willing to testify to what you have told us? In front of the sheriff, maybe a judge. Holbrook will kill me. He is planning to kill us, Beatrice pointed out. If we all go down, what good does your silence do? Tom swallowed hard, then nodded. All right, yes, I will testify. Good. Zachary turned to Beatrice. Pack what you can carry. We are going to town. Now, Zachary, this is our home, and it will not do us any good if we are dead. We are going to get the sheriff, make Tom give his testimony and force Holbrook's hand. If he burns the place while we are gone, at least we will be alive to rebuild. Beatrice wanted to argue, but she could see the sense in it. They moved quickly, grabbing essentials and loading them into the wagon. The horses sensed the urgency, shifting restlessly as Zachary hitched them up. They were almost ready to leave when Beatrice saw the smoke. It was coming from the direction of the barn, a thin, dark column rising into the early morning sky. Zachary, he cursed viciously. They are already here. Tom, get in the wagon. Beatrice, go. I am not leaving you. I need to get the horses out of the barn. I cannot do that and protect you at the same time. Please, Beatrice, get Tom to town, get the sheriff. I will hold them off until you get back." Every instinct screamed at her to stay to fight beside him, but she knew he was right. Getting help was more important than two more hands fighting a fire that was probably just a diversion. "If you die on me, Zachary Ashford, I will never forgive you," she said fiercely. He kissed her hard and fast. "I am not planning on it. Now go." Beatrice climbed into the wagon, Tom scrambling up beside her. She grabbed the reins and snapped them hard, sending the horses into a run. Behind her, she could hear Zachary shouting, could see smoke billowing thicker now. But she forced herself to look forward, to focus on getting to town as fast as the horses could manage. The ride was a blur. Tom clung to the seat as Beatrice pushed the horses harder than was safe, the wagon lurching over ruts and rocks. By the time they reached Reno, the animals were lathered and blowing hard. She pulled up in front of the sheriff's office and jumped down, bursting through the door. Sheriff Morrison looked up from his desk, startled. "Mrs. Ashford, Marcus Holbrook is burning us out. We have a witness. You need to come now." Morrison was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a weathered face and tired eyes. He stood slowly. "Now, that is a serious accusation. It is the truth." Tom stumbled in behind Beatrice. "I am Tom Miller. I have been working for Holbrook. He has been rustling Ashford's cattle and he is burning them out today. I can testify to all of it." Morrison studied Tom, then looked at Beatrice. He seemed to be weighing something internal. Finally, he reached for his gun belt. "All right, let us ride out and see what is happening." They took fresh horses, Morrison rounding up his deputy, a young man named Sam. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever. Beatrice's heart was in her throat the entire time, terrified of what they would find. As they crested the rise above the ranch, she saw the barn fully engulfed in flames. But Zachary was there, alive, running back and forth with buckets from the well. He had managed to get all the horses out, had them secured in the corral far from the fire. And standing in the yard, looking furious, was Marcus Holbrook with 3 of his men. "What is going on here?" Morrison demanded as they rode into the yard. Holbrook turned, his face a mask of false concern. "Sheriff, thank goodness. I was riding by and saw the fire. Stopped to help, but it looks like it is too far gone." "That is a lie," Zachary said, his face black with soot. "His men set this fire. I saw them." "You saw wrong," Holbrook said smoothly. "I have been here trying to help. Tom Miller says different." Morrison gestured to Tom, who was trying to make himself very small on his horse. Tom looked like he might be sick, but he forced the words out. "Mr. Holbrook hired me to rustle Mr. Ashford's cattle. He has been planning to burn them out for weeks. I can show you where the cattle are on Triple Bar land, all rebranded." Holbrook's face went dark red. "The boy is lying, probably trying to cover his own theft." "I am not lying," Tom's voice cracked. "You paid me $50 to help move those cattle. You said Ashford was too stubborn to take your offer, so you were going to make him sorry. That is what you said." Morrison looked between them, his hand resting on his gun. "That is some serious allegations, Tom. You prepared to swear to them?" "Yes, sir." Morrison turned to Holbrook. "Marcus, I am going to need you and your men to come back to town with me. Answer some questions. On the word of a lying kid and a desperate rancher." Holbrook's hand moved toward his gun. "Do not." Morrison's voice was sharp. "I do not want to have to shoot you, Marcus, but I will if you force it. You have been pushing the boundaries for a long time. If there is proof of what Tom says, you are going to face justice for it." For a long moment, the yard was silent except for the roar of the burning barn. Then Holbrook's shoulders slumped. "This is not over, Ashford." "Yes, it is," Zachary said quietly. "You lost." Morrison and his deputy took Holbrook and his men into custody, and Tom went with them to give a full statement. Before they left, Morrison pulled Zachary aside. "I will send some men back to help with the fire. I am sorry I did not act sooner, should have known what he was doing. You are acting now. That is what matters." After they left, Beatrice threw herself into Zachary's arms, not caring that he was filthy and smelled like smoke. "I thought I lost you. I am all right. The barn is gone, but we saved the animals. That is what matters." He held her tight. "You were so brave riding for help like that." "I was terrified the whole time." "That is what makes it brave." They stood together, watching the barn burn itself out. There was nothing to be done about it now, but come morning they would start rebuilding. They had the horses, most of the cattle once they recovered what Holbrook had stolen, and each other. They would manage. Over the next weeks, the truth came out. Tom's testimony led to the discovery of the rebranded cattle, and several of Holbrook's other hands came forward with their own stories of intimidation and illegal activity. Marcus Holbrook was arrested and charged with theft, arson, and a host of other crimes. His ranch was seized to pay his debts, broken up and sold off. The community rallied around Zachary and Beatrice. Neighbors they barely knew showed up to help rebuild the barn. Mrs. Kimball organized a fundraiser in town that brought in enough money to buy supplies. Even some of Holbrook's former hands, looking for honest work, hired on to help. Through it all, Beatrice worked alongside Zachary, her hands blistered and her back aching, but her heart full. This was her home, her life, and she had fought for it. She had not hidden or run away. She had stood her ground, and it felt powerful in a way she had never experienced before. The new barn went up in record time, larger than the old one and sturdier. On the day they finished, Zachary held a barbecue for everyone who had helped, and Beatrice found herself surrounded by friends and neighbors who treated her with genuine warmth. No one mentioned her scars. If they noticed them at all, it did not seem to matter. That night, exhausted and happy, Beatrice and Zachary finally had the house to themselves again. They sat on the porch in the cool evening air, Beatrice leaning against Zachary's shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it. We did." He kissed the top of her head. "I could not have done it without you. You know that, right? Your courage, your strength that made all the difference. You gave me the courage. You saw me as strong when I thought I was broken. You were never broken, just hurt. There is a difference." Beatrice turned to look up at him, this man who had become everything to her in such a short time. "I love you, Zachary Ashford." She had not said it before, had been afraid to speak the words out loud. But they were true, so deeply and completely true that holding them in felt impossible. Zachary's eyes went soft. "I love you too, Beatrice, more than I thought I could love anyone. You came into my life like a miracle I did not know I needed." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Beatrice felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she belonged. Not despite the scars, not despite the hard life and the danger and the uncertainty, but because of it all. Because here she was needed and valued and loved for exactly who she was. Fall turned to winter, and winter to spring. The ranch prospered under their joint care. They hired 2 steady hands, young men who worked hard and earned their keep. The cattle herd grew. The new barn stood strong against the weather, and in the spring, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one morning over breakfast, the words tumbling out nervously. "I think I am going to have a baby." Zachary nearly dropped his coffee cup. "You think? Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I have missed 2 courses and I have been sick in the mornings. Mrs. Kimball says those are sure signs." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her to her feet and spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby. Beatrice, that is incredible," she laughed, holding on to him. You are happy. Happy, I am ecstatic. He set her down carefully, suddenly cautious. Should you be working so hard? Should you be resting more? I am pregnant, not ill. Mrs. Kimball says I can keep working as normal until I get too big to move around easily. Still, I am going to take care of you. Make sure you do not overdo it. Beatrice smiled at his protective enthusiasm. She had worried he might see a baby as an added burden, but instead he was glowing with joy. It made her own happiness double. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Beatrice's belly swelled as summer arrived, and she found herself moving slower, tiring more easily. But she loved it, loved the feeling of life growing inside her, loved the way Zachary would talk to her stomach at night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together. Mrs. Kimball visited regularly, checking on Beatrice and offering advice. First babies take their time, she said. Do not be surprised if you go past your due date, and when the time comes, send Zachary for me. I have delivered more babies than I can count. In late August, on a hot afternoon when the sky was bright and cloudless, Beatrice felt the first pains. They were mild at first, just a tightening in her belly that came and went. But as the hours passed, they grew stronger and closer together. Zachary rode for Mrs. Kimball while Beatrice paced the house, breathing through the contractions. By the time they returned, she was sweating and shaking, the pain much worse than she had expected. That is normal, Mrs. Kimball assured her, rolling up her sleeves. Bringing a baby into the world is hard work, but you are strong, child. You can do this. Labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Beatrice had never experienced pain like this, relentless and overwhelming. But Zachary stayed with her, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. And finally, as the sun rose on a new day, their son was born. He was small and red and perfect, his cries strong and healthy. Mrs. Kimball cleaned him up and placed him in Beatrice's arms, and Beatrice looked down at the tiny face and felt her heart expand to hold this new, fierce love. He is beautiful, Zachary whispered, his voice choked with emotion. You did so well. I am so proud of you. We made him, Beatrice said, wonder in her voice. He is ours. They named him James after Zachary's father. And as Beatrice nursed him for the first time, feeling the pull of his small mouth, she thought about how far she had come. From the scarred woman stepping off the train, certain she would be rejected, to this moment, holding her son in the home she had helped build, with the man she loved beside her. What are you thinking? Zachary asked, stroking James's downy head. That I am happy. That I never thought I could be this happy. Neither did I. He kissed her forehead. You saved me, you know. This ranch was just work before you came. Now it is a home, our home. James grew quickly, a healthy baby with Zachary's dark hair and Beatrice's eyes. He was curious and active, crawling early and getting into everything. Beatrice learned to balance motherhood with the work of the ranch, and Zachary proved to be a devoted father, carrying James around in a sling while he did chores, talking to him constantly. When James was 2, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time it was a daughter, born in the spring with a shock of red hair that came from some distant ancestor neither of them could identify. They named her Sarah, and she was as fierce and determined as her mother. The years rolled on, full and busy. The ranch continued to prosper. They added more land, bought more cattle. Zachary built Beatrice a proper kitchen with a new stove, and she planted a garden that flourished despite the harsh climate. James started helping with small chores, and Sarah was not far behind, toddling after her brother with absolute determination. On their 5th anniversary, Zachary surprised Beatrice with a photograph session in town. A traveling photographer had set up shop, and Zachary insisted they have a proper family portrait made. Beatrice hesitated. "People will see my scars." "Good," Zachary said firmly. "Let them see. Let them see our beautiful family. Let them see how happy we are. I am proud of you, Beatrice. Proud of everything you are. I want the world to see." So they sat for the photograph, all four of them dressed in their best clothes. James tried to sit still and mostly succeeded. Sarah squirmed until Beatrice held her firmly. And Zachary sat beside Beatrice, his hand on her shoulder, his face serious but his eyes warm. When the photograph was developed, Beatrice stared at it for a long time. There were her scars clearly visible, a permanent mark on her face. But looking at the image, she did not see damage or shame. She saw a woman who had survived, who had built a life, who was surrounded by love. She saw strength. "It is perfect," she told Zachary. "You are perfect," he corrected. The children grew. James became tall and lean like his father, taking to ranch work with natural enthusiasm. Sarah was smaller but fierce, unafraid of anything. She could ride almost as well as James by the time she was 6, and she had a way with animals that reminded Beatrice of Zachary. More years passed. The ranch became one of the most successful in the area. Zachary's hard work and Beatrice's steady management had built something lasting. They hired more hands, expanded the house to give the children their own rooms, built a proper chicken coop and a smokehouse. But the best moments were still the quiet ones. Evenings on the porch with Zachary, watching the children play in the yard. Sunday dinners with Mrs. Kimball, who had become like family. Lying in bed at night, Zachary's arms around her, listening to his steady heartbeat. On their 10th anniversary, Beatrice woke early and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Zachary. She walked out to the porch and watched the sun rise over the land they had built together. The new barn stood strong. The horses grazed peacefully. In the distance, she could see cattle dotting the hillside. She heard Zachary come up behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist. "What are you doing up so early?" "Just thinking, remembering." "Remembering what?" "The day I arrived, how scared I was. How certain I was that you would send me away." She turned in his arms to face him. "I could never have imagined this, all of this." Zachary touched her scarred cheek, the gesture so familiar now, done so often over the years. "These scars are just maps to your strength. That is what I told you." "Do you believe it now?" Beatrice thought about everything they had been through. The fire at the barn, standing up to Holbrook, the hard work of building a life, bringing 2 children into the world, all of it had required strength she had not known she possessed. "Yes," she said, "I believe it." "Good." He kissed her, slow and sweet. "Because it is true. It has always been true." They stood together on the porch, watching the day wake up around them. Behind them they could hear the children starting to stir. Soon there would be breakfast to make, chores to do, the endless cycle of ranch work. But for this moment, it was just the 2 of them, together in the home they had built. "I love you," Beatrice said. "I know I tell you every day, but I need to say it again. I love you so much. I love you too. More than anything." Zachary pulled her closer. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for getting on that train, for being brave enough to start over. Thank you for seeing me, for looking past the scars to who I really was. Who you really are," he corrected. "Strong and beautiful and brave. The best thing that ever happened to me." James appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mama, Papa, what are you doing?" "Just talking," Beatrice said, reaching out to pull him into their embrace. A moment later Sarah joined them, and they stood there as a family, watching the sun climb higher. This was her life now. Not the lonely existence she had left behind in St. Louis, not the frightened woman on the train. She was Beatrice Ashford, wife and mother, rancher and partner. She was loved and needed and valued. The scars on her face had not disappeared, would never disappear, but they no longer defined her. They were just part of her story. Part of the journey that had brought her here, to this porch, to this family, to this life she had never imagined she could have. And it was everything. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by seasons and growth and the steady rhythm of ranch life. James, at 18, was nearly as tall as his father and had taken on more responsibility with the cattle. Sarah, at 16, had grown into a striking young woman who could outride most of the ranch hands and had a sharp mind for business. Beatrice watched them with pride, seeing pieces of herself and Zachary in both of them. The ranch had expanded significantly. They now ran nearly 500 head of cattle and had established a reputation for quality stock throughout Nevada. Zachary had proven his father right. The land had provided, but only through endless hard work and determination. Mrs. Kimball still visited, though she was slower now, her hair completely white. She sat in the kitchen one afternoon while Beatrice prepared preserves, watching with approval. "You have built something remarkable here," the older woman said. "When I first met you at that train station, so scared and uncertain, I hoped you would find happiness. But this exceeds anything I imagined." Beatrice smiled, stirring the pot of bubbling fruit. "I found more than happiness. I found purpose. I found home." "You found love," Mrs. Kimball corrected. "The real kind, the kind that weathers storms and grows stronger with time. Not many people get that." "No," Beatrice agreed softly. "I know I am lucky." That evening, as had become tradition, the whole family gathered for dinner. The table Zachary had built years ago now accommodated 6, their 2 ranch hands joining them for meals. It was loud and chaotic, full of laughter and conversation, arguments about cattle prices and teasing between the children. Beatrice sat at one end, Zachary at the other, and looked around at all of it, her family, her home, her life. The scars on her face had faded somewhat with time, less angry now, settled into familiar lines. She barely thought about them anymore except when she caught her reflection unexpectedly, or when some stranger in town stared. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the children had gone to their own pursuits, Beatrice and Zachary walked out to the fence line as the sun set. It was something they tried to do most evenings, a quiet moment together away from the bustle of the household. "James is talking about wanting to buy the Peterson place," Zachary said. "Expand our operation. He is ambitious. He is 18, thinks he knows everything." But Zachary's tone was affectionate. "He reminds me of my father in that way, always looking ahead, always planning the next move." "And Sarah wants to go to Carson City, learn bookkeeping properly. She says if we are going to expand, we need better records and financial management." Zachary chuckled. "She is probably right." Beatrice leaned against the fence, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to build. "They are growing up. They are." Zachary moved behind her, his arms coming around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "Does that make you sad?" "A little, but also proud. We raised good children, Zachary, strong, capable children who are not afraid of hard work or honest struggle, like their mother." Beatrice turned in his arms, looking up at him. At 40, Zachary had more gray in his dark hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but he was still the man who had lifted her veil that first day and told her scars were maps to strength. Still, the man who had made her believe she deserved happiness. "I was thinking," she said, "about maybe taking a trip, just the 2 of us. Mrs. Kimball could stay with the children and we could go to San Francisco for a week, see the ocean." Zachary's eyebrows rose. "Leave the ranch will survive without us for a few days." "And I would like to see more of the world, with you." He considered this, then smiled. "All right, yes, let us do it. We have earned it." They made the trip that fall, leaving James in charge and trusting that everything would be fine. The journey to San Francisco was long but exciting, and Beatrice felt like she was seeing the world through new eyes. The city was enormous, overwhelming in its crowds and noise. But the ocean, when they finally stood on the beach and watched the waves roll in, took her breath away. "It is beautiful," she whispered, the salt spray on her face. "So are you," Zachary said, and when she turned to protest, he stopped her with a kiss. "I have told you for 17 years, and I will keep telling you until you believe it. You are beautiful, Beatrice, inside and out." She did believe it now, most days. Not because the scars had vanished or because she had somehow become traditionally pretty, but because she had learned that beauty was more than smooth skin and perfect features. Beauty was strength and courage and love. Beauty was building a life with someone and raising children and surviving fires, both literal and metaphorical. They returned home after a week, both happy to be back despite the adventures they had enjoyed. The ranch was still standing, James having managed everything competently. Sarah had organized all their financial records. Everything was exactly as it should be. More years passed. James married a sweet-natured young woman from town named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the edge of the property. Sarah went to Carson City to study, but came back after 2 years, saying she missed the ranch too much. She took over all the financial management, proving herself invaluable. Beatrice and Zachary became grandparents when James and Elizabeth had a son. Holding that tiny baby, seeing James's face light up with the same wonder Zachary's had all those years ago, Beatrice felt the circle of life complete itself. They named the baby Zachary after his grandfather, and everyone called him Zach to avoid confusion. He was followed by a daughter, then another son. Sarah married one of the ranch hands, a quiet man named Daniel who adored her, and they had twin girls. The ranch house expanded again to accommodate everyone, growing from the simple structure Beatrice had first arrived at to a sprawling family compound. There was always noise, always activity, always something happening. Beatrice loved every chaotic minute of it. On their 25th anniversary, Zachary surprised Beatrice by having the old photograph from their 5th anniversary enlarged and framed. He hung it in the main room, right above the fireplace where everyone could see it. "Why?" Beatrice asked, though she was not upset, just curious. "Because I never want to forget where we started," Zachary said. "I never want to take for granted the miracle of you getting off that train and choosing to stay, choosing me, choosing this life." "I would choose it again," Beatrice said firmly. "Every time I would choose you." That night, lying in bed with Zachary's arms around her, Beatrice thought about the woman she had been. The scared girl on the train, pressing her hand to her scarred face, certain she was unworthy of love. She wanted to reach back through time and tell that girl what was coming. Tell her about Zachary, about the ranch, about the children and grandchildren and the life she would build. Tell her that the scars she was so ashamed of would become part of her strength, not her weakness. But maybe that girl had to make the journey herself, had to take the leap of faith, had to learn through living it that she was worthy of happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked sleepily. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am. We are both lucky." He pulled her closer. "I love you, Beatrice Ashford. I love you too." The years continued their march. Zachary's hair turned completely gray, then white. Beatrice developed arthritis in her hands that made some tasks difficult. But they were healthy and happy, still working the ranch, though they had passed most of the heavy labor to the younger generation. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. The ranch had become one of the largest and most successful in Nevada. known for quality cattle and honest dealing. 3 generations now lived and worked on the land Zachary's father had started. On a cool evening in their 40th year of marriage, Beatrice and Zachary sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, and the ranch was settling down for the night. They could hear their grandchildren playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "Do you ever think about that day at the train station?" Beatrice asked. "All the time," Zachary admitted. "Best day of my life. Even better than when the children were born." Different kind of good. That day was the beginning of everything. Every good thing that came after started with you stepping off that train. Beatrice took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. His hands were gnarled with age now, spotted and veined, but they were still the same hands that had lifted her veil, that had touched her scars with gentleness, that had held hers through 4 decades of life. "I was so frightened," she said softly. "So certain you would reject me. I know. I could see it in your eyes. What made you say it? About the scars being maps to strength." Zachary was quiet for a moment, thinking. "My father used to say that anything worth having required struggle, that the easy path never led anywhere meaningful. When I saw your scars, I saw proof that you had struggled and survived. I saw someone who had been tested and had not broken. That meant more to me than any pretty face ever could. You changed my life that day. You changed mine too." He squeezed her hand. "I was so lonely before you came. So tired of doing everything alone. You gave me partnership. You gave me love. You gave me a family and a reason to keep fighting for this place. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you." "Probably quieter," Beatrice said with a laugh. "Definitely quieter, but emptier. So much emptier." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Stars began to appear, bright in the clear desert sky. Inside the house, someone lit lamps and warm light spilled from the windows. "You have any regrets?" Beatrice asked. Zachary considered seriously. "No, I mean there are things I might have done differently, mistakes I made, but regrets? No, everything led us here to this moment. How can I regret any of it? I feel the same way." Beatrice looked down at their joined hands, even the fire as terrible as it was. "Even losing my parents, it all brought me here to you, to this life. I would not change it. The scars are just maps to your strength," Zachary said softly, repeating the words he had spoken 40 years ago. "Yes," Beatrice agreed. "They are." A few more years passed, slower now but still full. They celebrated their 45th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and a few great-grandchildren who were just beginning to appear. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management, with Sarah's financial acumen keeping everything profitable. Zachary's health began to decline slowly. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulation of age and hard work. He moved slower, tired more easily. Beatrice knew what was coming, could see the future approaching like a storm on the horizon, but she did not speak of it, and neither did he. They just lived each day, treasuring the time they had. One spring morning, nearly 47 years after Beatrice had stepped off the train in Reno, Zachary did not wake up. He had simply slipped away in the night, peacefully, with Beatrice asleep beside him. The grief was enormous, overwhelming. Beatrice had known it was coming, but that did not make it easier. For 47 years, Zachary had been her partner, her love, her reason for everything. The hole he left felt impossible to fill, but she was not alone. Her children surrounded her, supporting her through the worst of it. The ranch continued operating, life continued moving forward. And slowly, painfully, Beatrice found her footing again. She lived another 5 years after Zachary's death, long enough to see more great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that everything they had built would continue. On a quiet summer evening, sitting on the porch she had sat on so many times with Zachary, Beatrice closed her eyes and simply did not open them again. James found her there the next morning, peaceful in the chair, her face turned toward the mountains. At her funeral, the church in Reno was packed with family, friends, and people whose lives she had touched over nearly 5 decades in Nevada. Sarah stood to speak, her voice strong despite the tears on her cheeks. "My mother was the bravest person I ever knew," she said. "She came to Nevada as a frightened young woman, certain she was unworthy of love because of scars from a fire. But she found love anyway. She found strength. She built a life that touched so many people, that created this entire family standing here today. She taught us that survival was beautiful, that struggling made you strong, that scars were just maps to show where you had been and what you had overcome." Sarah touched her own cheek, unconsciously mirroring the gesture Beatrice had made so many times. "She and my father built something lasting. Not just the ranch, though that will continue for generations, but a legacy of love and strength and courage, of choosing to keep going even when it was hard, of seeing beauty in unexpected places, of judging people by their hearts instead of their faces." The funeral ended, and they buried Beatrice next to Zachary on a hillside overlooking the ranch. Their headstones stood side by side, 2 lives joined for nearly half a century. The ranch continued. James ran it with the same dedication his father had shown, and when he got too old, his son Zach took over. Sarah's twins both stayed involved, managing the financial side as their mother had. The Ashford Ranch became a fixture in Nevada, known for generations of honest dealing and quality stock. And in the main house, above the fireplace, the photograph from Beatrice and Zachary's 5th anniversary remained. New generations of Ashfords grew up looking at it, asking about the woman with the scars and the man who looked at her with such love. And they were told the story. About how Beatrice had come on the train when nobody thought she would, how Zachary had looked past her scars to see her strength, how they had built a life together against all odds, surviving threats and fires and the simple hard work of ranching. How they had loved each other completely for 47 years. The story became part of the family legend, passed down like a precious heirloom. And the lesson at its heart, that scars were just maps to strength, that true beauty came from courage and love, became part of the foundation on which generations of Ashfords built their lives. The ranch still stands today, over a century later, still in Ashford hands. And if you visit, if you talk to the family, they will tell you about Beatrice and Zachary, about the bride who came on the train and the cowboy who saw her true worth, about a love story that started with fear and blossomed into something lasting and true, about scars that became maps to strength, and strength that became love, and love that built a legacy that time could not erase.